First Contact's price. Dr. Elena Martinez stood motionless in the Mars Control Center as the impossible unfolded on her screens. The object had appeared seemingly from nowhere, decelerating at rates that should have torn it apart. Now, trailing plasma and debris, it was making a controlled descent toward Acidalia Planitia. Her team had trained for first contact scenarios, but not like this. Not with a ship that was clearly damaged and barely holding together. All stations, report, she commanded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The vessel was massive, at least 3 times the size of their largest Mars transport ships. Thermal signatures suggest multiple hull breaches, her systems analyst reported. Whatever this thing is, it's bleeding atmosphere. And doctor, there are definite life signs aboard. Elena's hand tightened on her console. Humanity's first contact wouldn't be a diplomatic meeting or a careful exchange of signals. Instead, they were witnessing what appeared to be a refugee ship making an emergency landing on their doorstep. Get me a direct line to Earth Command and wake up the quarantine teams. I want full containment protocols in place before that ship touches down. The next 6 hours were a blur of activity. The vessel, its hull scarred by what appeared to be weapons fire, settled into the red Martian soil with surprising gentleness. Teams in sealed suits approached cautiously, their sensors probing for any sign of biological or radiological threats. What they found changed everything. The beings inside were humanoid, but with translucent skin that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. They called themselves the Lumina, and they were running from something that had already destroyed 1,000 worlds. Elena sat across from their leader, Ambassador Vix, in the hastily configured quarantine chamber. A transparent barrier separated them, but the ambassador's fear transcended all barriers. "We didn't want to come to your system," Vex's translator conveyed, their bioluminescent patterns flickering rapidly. "We knew you were here, knew you were developing, but we had hoped to spare you. The darkness, it follows patterns. It consumes advanced civilizations first. Your relative technological immaturity might have protected you for centuries more. This darkness," Elena leaned forward, "tell me about it." The story that followed sent chills down her spine. An ancient force, perhaps as old as the galaxy itself, moved through space-consuming civilizations. It didn't communicate, didn't negotiate. It simply appeared, neutralized all advanced technology, and systematically erased all signs of intelligent life. "But why come here?" Elena asked. "Why risk drawing its attention to Earth?" Vix's skin pulsed with deep blues, a sign of profound sadness, they'd learned. "Because your species has something we've never seen before. You developed quantum technology differently than any civilization we've encountered. While we focused on quantum computing for faster calculations, you explored quantum entanglement for detection and communication. Your approach, it might be able to see them coming." Elena frowned. "Our quantum tech is primitive compared to what you're describing. We're still working out the basics of quantum radar and entanglement networks." Primitive. Vix's skin flickered with what their team had learned was their equivalent of a bitter laugh. "Your primitive approach might be exactly what we need. The darkness uses something like your quantum tunneling technology to appear inside star systems, but on a massive scale. Your detection systems, precisely because they're developing along a different path, might be able to spot their arrival." Before Elena could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Her tablet lit up with urgent messages from Earth's quantum detection grid, the experimental network they'd been testing for deep space observation. "Multiple anomalies detected at the system's edge," her assistant reported, face pale. "The pattern matches what the Lumina described. They followed them here." Vix's skin went almost completely dark. "No, it's too soon. We thought we had weeks before they could track us." Elena felt the weight of the moment settle onto her shoulders. Humanity's first contact had just become a battle for survival, and they were woefully unprepared. But as she looked at the data streaming in from their quantum detection grid, an idea began to form. "Ambassador, she said, turning back to Vix. You said our quantum technology developed differently. What if that's not just about detection? What if everything we've been doing differently could be an advantage? The ambassador's skin began to pulse with rapid patterns of interest. What do you mean? Your civilizations advanced along similar technological paths because you could learn from each other, but we developed in isolation, solving problems in ways you might never have considered. Our quantum tech isn't just different in how it detects things, it's different in how it interacts with space-time itself. Elena pulled up the latest data from their quantum defense research. We've been working on something we call quantum deflection, using entangled particles to create localized distortions in spacetime. It's crude, barely tested, but the darkness won't expect it. Vix finished, their skin now pulsing with rapid patterns of excitement. Their patterns of attack assume certain technological developments. They'd never encountered a species that approached quantum mechanics from your direction. The alarms continued to blare, but Elena felt a surge of determination. Humanity had just been thrust onto a galactic stage they hadn't known existed, faced with a threat they barely understood. But maybe, just maybe, their isolation had given them an advantage. Their primitive solutions might be exactly what was needed, precisely because they were different. "Get me Earth Command," she ordered. "And I want every quantum physicist and engineer we have on call. We have less than 48 hours to turn an experimental defense system into humanity's last hope." As she watched her team spring into action, Elena couldn't help but think about the irony. Humanity had always looked to the stars, wondering if they were alone, hoping to learn from more advanced civilizations. Instead, those civilizations had come to them, hoping humanity's unique path of development might hold the key to survival. The next 48 hours would determine if they were right. The Quantum Gambit. The holographic display in Houston's Emergency Command Center painted Earth's solar system in haunting clarity. Dr. Elena Martinez watched as red markers appeared at the edge of the projection, each representing another quantum disturbance detected by their hastily upgraded sensor network. The darkness was coming, and it was coming fast. "Status report on the Quantum Shield Network," she called out, her voice carrying across the bustling command center. The room had transformed over the last 36 hours, with scientists and military personnel from every major nation working side by side. The threat of extinction had a way of dissolving old rivalries. Dr. Wei Chen, her longtime colleague in quantum physics, looked up from his station. "We've successfully linked the quantum entanglement arrays from all major observatories. It's crude, but we're getting coherent data now. The network is stable." Elena nodded, allowing herself a moment of pride. What they'd accomplished in less than 2 days would have been deemed impossible a week ago. The quantum detection grid they'd been developing for deep space observation had been repurposed and expanded, creating a web of entangled particles that spanned the entire solar system. Ambassador Vix stood beside her, their translucent skin pulsing with patterns of anxiety and hope. "Your approach to quantum entanglement is unorthodox," they commented, watching the humans work. "We always saw quantum states as something to be controlled, harnessed. But you work with their natural tendencies." "We had to," Elena replied, studying the incoming data. "Our early quantum experiments failed because we tried to force quantum particles to behave the way we wanted. It wasn't until we started working with their inherent unpredictability that we made real progress." The command center's main screen suddenly flashed with new data. Dr. Chen's voice carried an edge of excitement. "Elena, look at this. The quantum disturbances we're detecting. They're not random. There's a pattern, but it's only visible when we stop trying to predict it precisely." Elena rushed to his station, Ambassador Vix following close behind. The display showed a chaotic mess of quantum fluctuations, but when they adjusted their detection algorithms to account for quantum uncertainty rather than fighting it, a clear pattern emerged. "They're testing our defenses," Vix realized, their skin flickering with recognition. This is how it began in other systems, but usually no one can detect them at this stage. Alina's mind raced with possibilities. Dr. Chen, what if we took this further? Instead of just detecting them, what if we used the quantum uncertainty principle to our advantage? The next 12 hours became a blur of theoretical physics and practical engineering. While the rest of Earth's military forces prepared conventional defenses, Alina's team worked on something unprecedented. They weren't just creating a detection system anymore. They were building a quantum maze. The principle is simple, Alina explained to the assembled military leaders. We know they use quantum tunneling technology to appear inside star systems, but quantum tunneling relies on probability waves. What if we could manipulate those probabilities? General Sarah Rodriguez, the newly appointed head of Earth's Unified Defense Force, leaned forward. In English, Doctor. We're going to make it impossible for them to know where they'll actually appear, Alina said. By creating a network of entangled quantum states throughout the solar system, we can essentially turn space itself into a probability maze. When they try to quantum tunnel into our system, they won't be able to predict where they'll end up. And how does this help us? The general asked. Ambassador Vix's skin pulsed with growing excitement as they understood. Because if they can't predict where they'll appear, they can't coordinate their attack. The darkness has always relied on precise, synchronized strikes. But if their forces are scattered randomly throughout the system, we can pick them off one by one. General Rodriguez finished, a smile spreading across her face. The next hours were spent implementing their plan. Every satellite, space station, and planetary outpost was equipped with quantum entanglement devices. These weren't weapons, they were probability manipulators, designed to work with quantum uncertainty rather than against it. Alina stood at her station, watching as the final pieces fell into place. The quantum maze was active, turning the space around Earth into a cosmic roll of the dice for any force trying to quantum tunnel into position. Multiple large-scale quantum events detected. The warning came just as their preparations completed. They're making their move. The command center fell silent as everyone watched the main display. Hundreds of massive objects were attempting to quantum tunnel into the solar system. But instead of appearing in precise attack formation, they were scattered randomly across space, some ending up light hours from their intended positions. It's working, Vix whispered, their skin pulsing with colors Alina had never seen before. They're confused. Their attack patterns are disrupted. Alina allowed herself a small smile. Humanity's primitive understanding of quantum mechanics had just turned the tables on an ancient threat. They hadn't tried to master quantum uncertainty. They'd embraced it, turned it into a weapon. But as she watched the enemy forces struggling to regroup, Alina knew this was just the beginning. They'd bought themselves time and thrown the enemy into disarray, but the real battle was still to come. The darkness would adapt, find new ways to attack. The question was, could humanity stay one step ahead? All stations, combat positions, General Rodriguez commanded. The quantum gambit worked, but now we fight. And we fight smart. Alina turned back to her console, already working on the next phase of their defense. They'd proven that humanity's unique approach to science could surprise even an ancient cosmic threat. Now they had to prove they could win. Silicon and steel. Deep in the asteroid belt, Captain Maya Chen watched the tactical display as the first wave of the darkness's ships emerged from their scattered quantum tunneling points. Their massive vessels, each the size of a small moon, gleamed with an otherworldly energy that seemed to absorb light itself. But they were disorganized, separated by millions of kilometers, thanks to humanity's quantum maze. All ships maintain radio silence. She ordered through the quantum entanglement communicators, passive sensors only. The small fleet of human vessels lay hidden among the asteroids, their hybrid systems powered down to minimal levels. Unlike the pure energy-based technology of their adversaries, Earth's ships combined traditional physical systems with advanced electronics. It was a compromise born of necessity. Humanity hadn't mastered pure energy technology yet. Now that limitation might save them. Enemy vessels are activating their energy weapon arrays, her tactical officer reported. They're trying to establish a coherent formation, but the quantum interference is making it difficult for them to coordinate. Maya allowed herself a grim smile. The enemy's attempts to gather their forces were being hampered by the very quantum uncertainty that humanity had learned to work with rather than against. But she knew they wouldn't stay scattered forever. "Status of Operation Trojan?" she asked, checking the readouts from the seemingly dormant asteroids surrounding her fleet. "All units in position, Captain. The mining charges have been converted exactly as specified. Dr. Martinez's quantum signatures are broadcasting perfectly. They'll read as simple space debris to their sensors." Maya nodded. While the rest of Earth's forces prepared obvious defenses, her fleet had been tasked with implementing a strategy that would have seemed absurd just days ago. They were going to fight an advanced alien force using modified mining equipment and computer viruses. "Multiple enemy ships approaching Sector 7, her sensor officer reported. "They're scanning the asteroid field. Wait, they're ignoring the modified asteroids completely. The quantum masking is working. Hold position," Maya commanded, watching as 3 massive enemy vessels moved into the trap. "Let them get comfortable." The ships of the darkness were technological marvels, operating on principles that humanity could barely understand. They used pure energy for everything. Weapons, shields, even their computer systems were based on light rather than electronics. It made them incredibly powerful, but also predictable in their assumptions. "They're in position," her tactical officer whispered. "All ships are within the mineral scanning range they've been using." Maya took a deep breath. "Execute Operation Trojan. All ships, stand by for Phase 2. Across the asteroid field, hundreds of modified mining charges activated simultaneously. But instead of detonating, they began broadcasting carefully crafted digital signals. Computer viruses designed to interact with energy-based systems in ways their creators had never anticipated. The effect was immediate and devastating. The enemy vessels, scanning the asteroids for resources, absorbed the digital attack through their own sensor systems. Their energy-based computers, designed to process pure light-based information, had no defenses against the primitive electronic viruses that now invaded their systems. "Direct hits confirmed," her tactical officer reported with barely contained excitement. "Their systems are attempting to purge the foreign code, but it's spreading faster than they can isolate it. Their energy weapons are cycling randomly. Shields are fluctuating." "All ships, execute Phase 2, Maya ordered. Her fleet of vessels, small and primitive by the enemy standards, powered up and emerged from hiding. They carried no energy weapons, no pure light-based systems that the enemy could easily counter. Instead, they were armed with masses of tungsten rods, electromagnetic railguns, and conventional missiles. Physical weapons that the energy-obsessed darkness had dismissed as obsolete. The first salvo caught the enemy completely off guard. Their fluctuating shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, proved far less effective against simple kinetic impacts. Tungsten rods, accelerated to relativistic speeds, punched through their defenses like bullets through paper. Conventional missiles, carrying payloads of transformative nanobots, attached to their hulls, and began converting their pure energy conduits into useless matter. "Enemy vessels attempting emergency quantum tunneling," her sensor officer reported. "But the viruses have corrupted their navigation systems. They're jumping blind." Maya watched as the massive ships vanished, their quantum jumps sending them to random locations throughout the solar system where other human fleets waited. They had turned the enemy's greatest strengths, their advanced energy technology and reliance on quantum precision, into vulnerabilities. "Status report from all sectors," she commanded, already preparing for the next wave. The battle was far from over, but they had proven something crucial. Humanity's primitive hybrid approach to technology, combining physical weapons with digital systems, could hurt these ancient beings. "Captain," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving a priority message from Dr. Martinez. The quantum detection grid has spotted something big forming at the edge of the system. much bigger than anything we've seen so far. Maya studied the incoming data with growing concern. The darkness was adapting, gathering its forces for a massive push. But humanity would adapt too. They had turned their technological limitations into advantages once. They could do it again. "Send word to all fleets," she ordered. Operation Trojan was successful, but they'll be ready for it next time. We need new hybrid solutions, new ways to combine our silicon and steel with their energy and light. And we need them fast. As her crew rushed to comply, Maya couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Humanity had always assumed they would need to catch up to alien technology to compete on the galactic stage. Instead, it was their unique combination of old and new, physical and digital, that gave them a fighting chance against an enemy that had forgotten the value of simple solutions. The next wave would be harder. The darkness would learn, adapt, find ways to counter their hybrid tactics. But humanity had something they didn't: the ability to think outside the boundaries of pure technological advancement, to find strength in the very limitations they had yet to overcome. The human factor. Colonel Sarah West stood in the wreckage of what had once been a darkness vessel, her magnetized boots keeping her anchored in the zero-gravity environment. The boarding action had been desperate, improvised in the heat of battle. Exactly the kind of chaos that had been defining humanity's resistance so far. "What am I looking at, Doctor?" she asked, her helmet lights illuminating the strange crystalline structures that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. Dr. Martinez's voice crackled through her comm system. "If Ambassador Vix is right, that's their primary command node. It's essentially a quantum computer that processes combat data and generates perfect tactical responses. The darkness has used these to predict and counter every species they've encountered. Until now." Sarah studied the alien technology with a mixture of awe and determination. Her team had managed to board this vessel after its quantum systems were scrambled by Earth's defense grid, leaving it stranded near Mars. What they found inside was changing everything they thought they knew about their enemy. "They're not just machines," Sarah commented, watching the intricate patterns flowing through the crystalline structure. "But they're not purely biological either. There's something in between." "Exactly," Elena replied. "They evolved beyond the distinction between organic and mechanical. Every ship is part of a single consciousness, sharing data and experience through quantum entanglement. It's how they've remained undefeated for so long. They learn and adapt as a collective." Sarah's team moved through the vessel, placing quantum disruptors at key points. The devices were cobbled together from Earth's experimental quantum technology, modified according to Vix's insights. But their most important feature wasn't their technology. It was their unpredictability. "You know what I find interesting?" Sarah said, watching her team work. "They got all this advanced tech, this perfect tactical computer that's supposed to predict everything. But they keep falling for the oldest trick in the book, humans doing what humans do best: improvising." She thought back to the recent battles. The darkness had quickly adapted to Operation Trojan, developing defenses against human computer viruses. They'd found ways to shield against kinetic weapons. Their quantum tunneling had evolved to work despite the quantum maze. By all logical measures, humanity should have been defeated. But they weren't. "Their predictive algorithms are based on perfect logic," Elena explained. "They analyze patterns, calculate probabilities, determine optimal responses. But humans don't always choose the optimal response. Sometimes we choose based on instinct, emotion, or just to try something different." Sarah smiled behind her helmet visor. "You mean we're winning because we're illogical? We're winning because we're unpredictable. Every time their tactical computers come up with a perfect counter to our strategies, we change the rules of engagement entirely. They predict we'll retreat when outgunned. We charge instead. They expect us to concentrate our forces. We scatter them. They prepare for a frontal assault. We sneak in through the back door." A alert sounded through the comm system. "Colonel," one of her team members called out, "we're picking up energy spikes. The ship is trying to repair itself." Time to introduce a little more chaos into their perfect system, Sarah declared. All teams, activate your disruptors on my mark. Random sequence, just like we planned. The quantum disruptors they'd placed throughout the ship weren't synchronized. Instead, each one activated at random intervals, creating a cascade of quantum interference that even the ship's advanced systems couldn't predict or counter. It was messy, inefficient, and completely effective. Energy levels dropping, her tech specialist reported. Their systems are trying to compensate, but they can't establish a stable pattern to counter the disruption. Sarah watched as the crystalline structures around them began to dim. Dr. Martinez, are you getting this data? What exactly are we looking at? It's fascinating, Elena replied, her voice filled with excitement. Their quantum computer isn't just failing, it's getting confused. Every time it generates a prediction, our random actions invalidate it. It's creating a feedback loop in their system. The implications were staggering. The darkness had evolved to be perfect, to predict and counter any tactical approach. But in doing so, they'd lost something that humanity still possessed: the ability to act without perfect information, to make decisions based on incomplete data, to trust instinct over logic. All teams, begin Phase 2, Sarah ordered. Let's show them another human specialty, turning an enemy's strength into a weakness. Her teams began uploading randomly generated quantum noise into the ship's systems. Not viruses or attacks, just pure chaos, the kind of quantum uncertainty that human scientists had learned to work with. The effect was immediate. The ship's attempts to predict and counter their actions became increasingly erratic as its perfect logical systems tried to find patterns in intentional randomness. Colonel, Elena's voice held a note of triumph. We're seeing similar reactions across their entire fleet. The quantum entanglement that lets them share tactical data is spreading the confusion. They can't distinguish between real threats and random noise anymore. Sarah began the evacuation of her teams. They'd achieved their objective, but more importantly, they'd proven something crucial. The perfect logic of the darkness had a critical weakness. They had no defense against beings who embraced imperfection, who turned unpredictability into a weapon. Dr. Martinez, Sarah called as her team made their way back to their ships. I think we just proved that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. It's our chaos. As if to prove her point, alarms began blaring throughout the fleet. The darkness was launching a massive counterattack, but this time, their movements were different, hesitant, almost uncertain. Their perfect tactical computers were starting to doubt their own predictions. And in that doubt, humanity had found its greatest advantage. They couldn't match the enemy's technology or their perfect logic. But they could keep doing what humans had always done best: adapt, improvise, and turn their very imperfections into strengths. Unity's edge. The combined command center beneath the lunar surface hummed with activity as representatives from every spacefaring nation on Earth gathered around the holographic display. Dr. Elena Martinez stood beside Ambassador Vix, watching as the final pieces of humanity's desperate plan came together. They're gathering their forces, General Rodriguez reported, pointing to the massive concentration of darkness vessels at the edge of the solar system. Our quantum interference isn't working as well anymore. They're adapting, finding ways to stabilize their tunneling points. Elena nodded grimly. The enemy had been learning, evolving their perfect systems to account for human unpredictability. But in doing so, they'd revealed something crucial about their nature. They're becoming more like us. Ambassador Vix observed, their skin pulsing with complex patterns. In attempting to counter human chaos, they've had to introduce elements of uncertainty into their own systems. They're no longer purely logical. And that's exactly what we've been waiting for, Elena said, turning to address the assembled leaders. They'd spent millennia evolving toward perfect order, perfect prediction. But to fight us, they've had to step back from that perfection. They've had to change their fundamental nature. Captain Maya Chen's hologram flickered as she joined the conversation from her fleet position in the asteroid belt. The latest attacks have been different. More aggressive, less calculated. Almost emotional. Because they're frustrated, Colonel West added from her position near Mars. For the first time in their existence, they can't simply overwhelm and consume. They have to fight, really fight, and they don't know how. Elena activated the main display, showing the culmination of humanity's most ambitious project yet. While the darkness had been adapting to human chaos, Earth's scientists had been studying the enemy's quantum technology, learning from every encounter, every piece of salvage technology. We've all been working on different approaches to fighting them, Elena explained. Some of us focused on quantum disruption, others on physical weapons, others on digital warfare. But we've been sharing everything we've learned, combining our knowledge in ways they never expected. The display showed a network of satellites and stations throughout the solar system, each incorporating technology from different nations, different approaches. It wasn't elegant or perfectly efficient. It was human, a combination of various solutions working together in organized chaos. The darkness evolved to be a single perfect entity, Elena continued. But humanity, we've always been multiple entities, different nations and cultures, finding ways to work together while maintaining our individuality. And that's not our weakness, it's our strength. Ambassador Vix's skin pulsed with sudden understanding. You're going to use their own evolution against them. Elena nodded. Every time they adapt to counter one of our approaches, they have to fundamentally change their systems. They're no longer a single perfect entity. They're becoming fragmented, divided. And now, we strike at that division. General Rodriguez finished. All units commence Operation Unity. Across the solar system, humanity's combined fleet began to move. But unlike previous engagements, they weren't fighting as separate units. The quantum communication network they'd developed allowed them to coordinate in ways that mirrored the darkness's own quantum unity, but with a crucial difference. Where the darkness operated as a single mind, humanity operated as many minds working in concert. Each fleet, each ship, maintained its individual approach while contributing to the greater strategy. Some vessels launched traditional weapons, others broadcast quantum interference, others deployed electronic warfare, all coordinated, but none perfectly predictable. The darkness's response was immediate and devastating. Their massive fleet began quantum tunneling into the solar system, no longer scattered by humanity's defenses. But as they emerged, something unprecedented happened. Their formations, Captain Chen reported, they're breaking down. Different ships are responding in different ways. Some are attacking aggressively. Others are holding back. Others are trying to maintain their original tactical patterns. Elena watched as the enemy fleet began to fragment. The changes they'd been forced to make to combat humanity's chaos had introduced true diversity into their perfect system. And now, faced with humanity's unified but diverse response, they couldn't maintain their coherence. All units, General Rodriguez commanded, execute your assigned strategies. Remember, coordinate, but don't synchronize. Let them face the full spectrum of human ingenuity. The battle that followed would be studied for generations to come. Humanity's forces struck from multiple angles, each group using different tactics. When the darkness adapted to one approach, they were hit by something completely different. Their attempts to predict and counter human strategies became increasingly erratic as they tried to maintain tactical unity while fighting in ways that went against their very nature. In the Lunar Command Center, Elena and Ambassador Vix watched as the mighty fleet of the darkness began to crumble, not through overwhelming force or superior technology, but through the power of unity and diversity, humanity's greatest strength. They're retreating, Colonel West announced, her voice filled with disbelief. Multiple quantum tunneling signatures detected. They're leaving the system. The command center erupted in cheers, but Elena kept her eyes on the tactical display. The darkness was withdrawing, but not in defeat, in confusion. For the first time in their ancient existence, They had encountered something they couldn't simply consume and adapt to. They had met a species that turned chaos into strength, that found power in diversity rather than perfect unity. Ambassador Vix turned to Alina, their skin pulsing with colors she had never seen before. "Your species has done more than survive," they said. "You've shown them a different way to exist. The question is, what will they do with that knowledge?" Alina watched as the last enemy ships vanished from their sensors. Humanity had won their first galactic battle, not by becoming more like their advanced adversaries, but by embracing who they truly were. A species of dreamers and warriors, scientists and poets, individuals working together to achieve the impossible. "They'll be back," she said finally. "But when they return, they'll find us ready. Not because we're perfect, but because we never will be. And that's exactly what makes us strong." The solar system fell quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. Humanity had taken its first steps onto the galactic stage, and they had done it their way. Messy, unpredictable, and undeniably effective. The cosmos had indeed been stunned, not by overwhelming power or perfect technology, but by the strength that comes from embracing imperfection and finding unity in diversity.